If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and hit the notification bell. I post a new Tom Brady video every day.
Coach Bruce Arians expects several of his key guys to return this week.
Yeah, the only guys that wouldn't have practiced today was Cyril Grayson, Ronald Jones, and Anthony Nelson. The guys in the 21-day, they're just, it was a walkthrough anyway, so we won't know much about any of those guys anyway. But, I think Cyril and Rojo are doubtful. Anthony Nelson, got my fingers crossed. So, because he's been playing really, really good.
Who's the most important piece? We know Brady will be Brady. Who's the most important piece for the Bucs if Tom is going to take this team back to the Super Bowl?
I think it's a healthy playoff Lenny. That has to be the guy. When he got injured, he had the 6th most touches of anybody in the league. He was a big part of this offense. You think back to that playoff run last year. He was an outstanding player in that run. If you take into account how important the defense was to them last year and how injured they are now, you cannot expect the defense to come up as big as they did last year. So it's going to be an offensive game, which means Tom Brady's going to have to be well protected, make a lot of good decisions, which we know he can, but he's going to need someone to take some of that load. And the person who's taking most of that load off of him throughout the course of the season has been Leonard Fournette.
You mentioned Shaq Barrett, Jason Pierre-Paul, Leonard Fournette. He expects all of those guys to return. Barrett's not only been dealing with a sprained ACL and MCL, but he also has had a bout of COVID. But I'm told his symptoms were very, very minor. Jason Pierre-Paul's been dealing with a torn rotator cuff throughout much of this season, but I am told that they just felt like they needed to shut him down so that they could give him some more rest so that he could return. And then Fournette was able to start running this past week with the coaching staff, so that was very encouraging. Arians said that the one guy that's the big question mark is going to be Lavonte David. He's been dealing with a foot sprain since week 15, so he's going to be the biggest question mark. Jamel Dean's also a question mark right now with a hamstring injury. Cyril Grayson, who had the game-winning touchdown catch against the Jets with 21 seconds left, he's also dealing with a hamstring injury. Arians didn't seem very optimistic about that one.
Their quarterback in Tampa has slightly more playoff experience than the quarterback in Philadelphia. Can the Eagles pull off the upset, Kimberly?
I mean, can they? Technically, yes.
Don't do that. Don't do that.
But I don't think they will. I think, again, like you're talking about, the Bucs are led by the greatest quarterback of all time. Right. So he counts for about 12 players in itself.
And Brady, I love this stat. Tim, you'll appreciate it. He's played the Eagles 8 times in his career. He's averaging over 320 yards per game against the Eagles, second most against any single opponent. So he's like, bring on Philly. I got this. Philly gets Tampa with a red-hot Tom Brady. 326 yards passing in their rout over the Panthers last week. That put him over 5,000 for just the second time in his career.
Forecasts change every day, especially in Florida, right? But looks like you could get a good bit of wind and maybe even a little bit of rain. How much, and it'll affect the kicking game, but you've got one of the better bad weather quarterbacks, right? How much would that affect your passing game?
It shouldn't affect it at all. Depends, what kind of wind is it directed? Is it across the field? How bad's the gust? Those things do affect it. But that's one thing about Tom. He's played in a bunch of bad weather and a lot colder. So at least it'll be in the 70s.
Yeah, so not only is Leonard Fournette back, but Gio Bernard and Lavonte David, their 21-day windows open today off of IR. So that is promising for a Bucs team they brought everybody back to make the Super Bowl run. So now the playoffs are about to start, and they're hopefully getting some help.
Lavonte David is a beast.
Monster, yes.
Yeah, that's big. That's actually probably even bigger.
So they got 21 days. Yeah, they're running out of time, but, that's good news.
Tim, what does Fournette's return mean for Brady and company?
Well, it's critical. Max, I'm kind of on the record of saying everything in terms of Tampa's Super Bowl hopes changed when Chris Godwin was injured, just because he does so much for that team. They're not just the passing game, but how they used him in the run game as well. And so Fournette is the type of guy, because of his physicality, that it doesn't have to be blocked perfectly for him. So I do think him coming back and maybe kind of going on one of those runs like we've seen him do before in the postseason, would be one of the things to help kind of soften the blow without Chris Godwin being able to return to the lineup.
Who do you trust more to make it to the Super Bowl this year, Belichick or Brady?
Well, I might have said Brady before the Chris Godwin injury, before the Antonio Brown whatever you want to call that fiasco out there. But when you look at it, I think until Bill proves it, it's going to be hard for me to say Belichick, because Brady's still proving it. Brady's proven it last year.
Is this a bad matchup, do you think, Tim, for the Bucs? The Eagles have some real studs on the offensive line, a dual threat quarterback. I mean, they can run it.
Yeah, that is true. I don't think this is a bad matchup for the Eagles. I think, for the Bucs having the Eagles. Yes, they can run the football, and yes, their quarterback being involved in the run game does make it a little bit easier, to run the football, just because there's an extra player you have to account for. But listen, Tampa's good at stopping the run. I know it hasn't been the same recently, but they are getting guys back. A lot of the runs people have had success with have been perimeter type runs. They're getting perimeter players back.
When these two teams faced off in week 6, Nick Sirianni didn't even really seem to want to try to run the ball against the Bucs. The Dallas Cowboys were the same way in week 1. But this Bucs run defense has been looking vulnerable the last 2 weeks. They've given up over 100 yards on the ground the last 2 games. The problem is, Arians said, is that the strength of their defense is on the inside. So some of these teams are now kicking to the outside, and the Eagles are one of those teams. They're averaging 6 yards a carry on perimeter runs because Miles Sanders just has so much speed getting to that perimeter. And so the Bucs have got to do a better job of setting the edge. And Arians is hopeful that having Barrett back, having Pierre-Paul back, and also even Lavonte David, which will really help them from an experience standpoint, because he said those guys just don't panic.
The first half of the first Philly game, they had 5 first downs, 73 yards. You're up by 2 touchdowns. They moved the ball in the second half, but Lavonte David didn't play in that game, Bruce. So how critical could his health be going into this game?
Oh, it's a huge addition if we can get him back out there. Just being an all-pro player, but also his leadership ability and everything that he brings would be a huge blessing if he can play.
And so, I think, making Philadelphia a one-dimensional team, which they kind of have been in a sense anyway offensively, ends up being the key. Known passing situations is where Jalen Hurts will struggle, and I think ultimately Tampa gets them in enough of those. Hurts needs to play really well in the passing game because, you're not going to be able to run it all day long on Tampa Bay. And what's difficult about passing the football well, when you're a runner, is you're tired. You're not as accurate. So I think those things end up being a problem. And so being in known passing situations after having run the quarterback are things that Philadelphia is going to have to be very careful with, but they're going to need to really rely on him, as a runner. But then they're also going to need him to play one of his best games as a passer. And so really, I do think this comes down to, Sirianni's talking about his quarterback has improved. I think that's true. The question is, how much has he improved? Because he certainly has been up and down throughout the season as a passer.
Absolutely. And if there were ever a difficult task to try to challenge that and just to progress, it is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
And if there's one thing I know about Kimberly Martin, it is that you have an unyielding, unshakable faith in Tom Brady. Does that continue?
It does. It does, because you have the greatest quarterback of all time. It should. And I think the question of can the Eagles pull off an upset? Yes, technically they can. Anything is possible. But when you've got Brady, you've got a team. This Bucs team was built to repeat. Yes, they've had injuries, but they're facing an Eagles team that has a quarterback who's battling an ankle injury. We need to make sure that Jalen Hurts is 100%, because the Eagles might lead the league in rushing, but if he's not 100%, then they're not as formidable.
Hey, Bruce, I know this it was a while back when you played the Philadelphia Eagles earlier this season. How different is this team right now? They got on a pretty good roll late in the year, it seems.
Oh, yeah, totally different. Playing with a ton of confidence, won a bunch of ball games since we played them. And, so once you get in the playoffs, anything can happen. So they're going to be fired up. They got a ton of weapons, and they look pretty healthy. Yeah, it's a totally different football team than we played back there in October.
By the way, the Buccaneers led the NFL with 308 passing yards per game, while the Eagles led with 160 rushing yards. So it really is strength against strength.
That's it for this video. I post a new Tom Brady video every day, so please like and subscribe. That way you'll always have a new Tom Brady video to watch every single day.